Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we are diving into a seriously fascinating piece of ancient philosophy. It's called the Mahādukkhakkhandha Sutta, which translates to, and this is a bit ominous, I know, the greater discourse on the mass of suffering. Right? Heavy title. But if you've ever found yourself wondering why we humans are just so wired for conflict or anxiety or that nagging sense of dissatisfaction, you're going to want to stick around. We're going to use the source material to decode the human condition, and we're doing it through a surprisingly rigorous, almost mathematical framework. Okay, let's dive into this. To really get what this text is doing, we have to start with the inciting incident. The source material kicks off with this really fascinating confrontation. Picture this. Wandering ascetics from rival philosophical schools march right up to the Buddha's monks and basically throw down the gauntlet. They say, look, your teacher goes on and on about understanding sensual pleasures, physical form, and feelings. Well, guess what? We teach the exact same thing. So what makes your philosophy actually any different? And honestly, it's a brilliant question. If every philosophy out there is diagnosing the exact same human desires, what actually sets this specific teaching apart? To answer that, we're going to follow the exact logical progression laid out in the text itself. We'll start with the great philosophical challenge, move into the trap of sensual pleasures, look at form and inevitable decay, unpack the illusion of feelings, and finally, reveal the ultimate escape.
So, part 1, the great philosophical challenge.
The monks are hanging out in the city of Savatthi when they get cornered by these rival thinkers asking, what is the difference between the ascetic Gautama and us? Because everyone generally agrees on the absolute basics here. As humans, we all have to figure out how to deal with worldly pleasures, our physical bodies, and our internal emotions. But when the monks take this challenge back to the Buddha, he doesn't just hand them some vague mystical theory. No, he hits them with a highly systematic, analytical matrix. He argues that the true difference lies in understanding 3 very specific aspects of literally every single human experience. And this brilliantly illustrates his point. The text argues that rival philosophies only ever see fragments of the big picture. To actually comprehend the human condition, you have to map out the gratification, the danger, and the escape across 3 specific domains: sensual pleasures, physical form, and feelings. You can't just slap a label on it and saying, oh, pleasure is bad, or meditation is good. It doesn't work like that. You have to impartially analyze the appeal, the inherent flaw, and the ultimate way out. This 3x3 framework is literally the engine powering this entire ancient text. Let's move to part 2, the trap of sensual pleasures. Prepare yourselves because the contracts we're about to explore are extreme. The text starts by stepping right into the very first row of our matrix. And you know what? It doesn't deny that pleasure exists. Beautiful sights, amazing sounds, delicious tastes, these things are genuinely, absolutely enjoyable. The source material completely validates that we experience real, visceral joy from our 5 senses. But, and this is a massive but, according to the text, this genuine, undeniable enjoyment is the exact reason why sensual pleasure forms such a perfect, dangerous trap. Because once we start craving those pleasures, the text violently shifts our focus to the danger. Just think about what it takes to afford these things. People engage in endless, grueling labor, out there braving extreme weather. If they fail, they suffer the pure agony of lost efforts and squandered wealth. And if they succeed, they're living in this constant state of paranoia about thieves or natural disasters taking it all away. But the text goes way deeper into the interpersonal cost. It points out that the pursuit of sensual desires is exactly what causes mothers and fathers to argue, siblings to turn on each other, and, zooming all the way out, it's what causes kings to wage massive bloody wars. It perfectly diagnoses how fighting over resources to satisfy our senses is the ultimate root of conflict, both ancient and completely modern. And the source material does not hold back on illustrating these escalating dangers. We're talking brutal battlefield casualties, arrows and swords, horrific sieges involving boiling mud and cow dung. It notes that this desperate desire for pleasure drives up violent crime, like robbery and adultery. In the ancient world, that led straight to gruesome state-administrated physical tortures. We're talking about being flayed, burned, or literally thrown to the dogs. Now, the analytical point here isn't just for shock value. It's meant to force the reader to weigh the sheer, massive scale of all this historical, bloody suffering against the fleeting gratification of, say, a really delicious meal or a pretty view. Which brings us to part 3, form and inevitable decay. We are moving to the second row of the matrix. Just like before, the text starts right off with the gratification. What is the absolute ultimate appeal of the physical body? Well, the source defines the peak of human physical vitality as the radiant health, beauty, and energy of a 15 to 16-year-old. Just pure biological vigor. The text totally acknowledges the intense, undeniable joy that comes from experiencing that kind of vitality. But as you might have guessed, it sets up this beautiful peak for one reason: to demonstrate a completely devastating drop.
Now, what's really interesting about this timeline is how systematically the text deconstructs that physical vitality. It basically forces us to fast forward the biological clock. And spoiler alert, nature isn't very kind. By age 80, the body is bent, broken, wrinkled, and gray. Then we hit the final days, bedridden, lying in one's own filth. Then it goes beyond death, right into the charnel ground. 3 days post-mortem, a bloated corpse being eaten by scavengers. A year later, nothing but scattered, bleached bones. Fast forward a few decades, and it's all reduced to fine dust. This stark, absolutely undeniable biological reality is used to shatter the psychological illusion of physical attachment. The inherent danger of physical form is that it is fundamentally, unavoidably wired for decay.
Let's transition to part 4, the illusion of feelings. This is the third and definitely the most subtle domain of the Matrix. When the text tackles internal psychological feelings, it actually skips right past normal everyday worldly happiness and goes straight to the highest possible mental states a human can achieve. It maps out the 4 stages of jhana, which is deep meditative absorption. So a person moves from joy born of a quiet mind into deep inner tranquility and focus, then into pure equanimity and physical comfort, and finally arriving at complete neutrality, totally beyond pleasure and pain. In these advanced states, a person has zero desire to harm themselves or anyone else. It is just absolute, unadulterated peace. But here is the ultimate plot twist of the entire source text. Look at the contrast here. You have the pure bliss of meditation on one hand, a state of profound peace and non-harming. But even that contains a critical danger. And the danger is, it is impermanent. It is completely bound to change. The text argues that resting your ultimate happiness on even the most profound, incredibly peaceful state of mind is still a trap, simply because that state will eventually end. If you get attached to that peaceful feeling, the inevitable fading of it is going to cause you suffering. This is a level of psychological analysis that goes way, way beyond just trying to be a good person. So how do we fix it? That leads us to part 5, the ultimate escape. So the crucial point is, how does the source material actually resolve this massive, overwhelming buildup of suffering? Well, the escape is precisely defined as the complete removal and abandonment of desire and lust. The specific ancient term used is Chandaraga, for all 3 of those domains: pleasures, form, and feelings. And I really want you to notice what the escape is not. It's not about trying to change the outside world so we never get sick. It's not about achieving world peace through better politics. It's not even about locking yourself away and staying in meditation forever. The escape is a fundamental internal rewiring. It's about detaching from the desire for the world to be a certain way. By completely abandoning the lust for gratification, you effectively insulate yourself from the danger. Which brings us right back full circle to the challenge those rival ascetics threw down at the very beginning. The text concludes with this core principle: only by knowing the gratification, the danger, and the escape as they truly are, can one comprehend these domains. This 3x3 framework is the ultimate differentiator between this philosophy and everything else we've analyzed. You can't just crave the good stuff and hate the bad stuff. True understanding and actual lasting freedom requires an unflinching analytical awareness of the entire cycle. As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a provocative thought to chew on. We've just looked at an ancient matrix for decoding human suffering. But I want you to look at your own life right now. Whether it's an intense, burning pursuit of some sensory pleasure, a deep attachment to your youth and your physical health, or even just a really peaceful emotional state that you are desperately trying to hold on to. Which of your own attachments are you currently protecting? And more importantly, have you honestly weighed that fleeting gratification against the inevitable danger? Think about it. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.